The 27th of January, 1945. The Soviet army enters Auschwitz, the largest of the extermination centers, located in German-occupied Poland. It is estimated that a minimum of 1.3 million people were deported to this camp between 1940 and 1945, and of these, at least 1.1 million were murdered. However, not all of its prisoners died. In this Nazi factory of horror, the Soviet soldiers liberate more than 7,000 surviving inmates who are mostly ill and dying, and some of them were subjected to cruel and painful pseudo-medical experiments performed by the most notorious of the Nazi doctors. His name is Josef Mengele. Josef Mengele was born on the 16th of March, 1911, in the Bavarian city of Günzburg, then part of the German Empire. Young Josef, the eldest son of Karl Mengele, a prosperous manufacturer of farming equipment, studied medicine and physical anthropology at several universities. In 1935, he earned a doctorate in physical anthropology from the University of Munich, and in 1936, he passed the state medical exams. In 1937, Mengele began working at the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene in Frankfurt. There, he was an assistant to the director, Dr. Ottmar von Verschwer, who was a leading geneticist known for his research on twins. Under Verschwer's direction, Mengele completed an additional doctorate in 1938. Mengele did not actively support the Nazi Party before it came to power in January 1933. However, during his university studies, Mengele, as with the Nazi Party, embraced racial science, the false theory of biological racism. He believed that the Germans were biologically different from and superior to members of all the other races. Racial science was a fundamental tenet of Nazi ideology, which Hitler used to justify the forced sterilization of persons with certain physical or mental diseases or physical deformities. The 1935 Nuremberg race laws, which outlawed marriage between Germans and Jewish, Black or Romani peoples, were also based upon racial science. In 1938, Mengele joined the Nazi Party and SS. In his work as a scientist, he sought to support the Nazi goal of maintaining and increasing the supposed superiority of the German race. Mengele's employer and mentor, Dr. Verschwer, also embraced biological racism. In addition to conducting research, Verschwer and his staff, including Mengele, provided expert opinions to Nazi authorities, who had to determine whether persons qualified as German under the Nuremberg laws. Mengele and his colleagues also evaluated Germans whose physical or mental condition might qualify them to be forcibly sterilized or barred from marriage under German law. In 1939, Mengele married Irena Schönbein. Their only son Rolf was born in 1944. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. In June 1940, Mengele was drafted into the Wehrmacht, the German armed forces. A month later, he volunteered for the medical service of the Waffen-SS, which was the military branch of the SS. At first, Mengele worked for the SS Race and Settlement Main Office in German-occupied Poland, where he evaluated the criteria and methods used by the SS to determine whether persons claiming to be of German descent were racially and physically suitable to qualify as Germans. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, started on the 22nd of June, 1941. For about 18 months after it began, he saw extremely brutal fighting on the Eastern Front. In addition, in the first weeks of Germany's attack on the Soviet Union, Mengele's division slaughtered thousands of Jewish civilians. After Mengele rescued 2 German soldiers from a burning tank, he was decorated with the Iron Cross, both second and first class, and was promoted to SS Hauptsturmführer, which was the equivalent to the rank of SS captain. Mengele returned to Germany in January 1943. While awaiting his next Waffen-SS assignment, he began to work again for his mentor Verschwer. Verschwer had recently become the director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Genetics, and Eugenics in Berlin. On the 30th of May, 1943, the SS assigned Mengele to Auschwitz, where he worked as one of the camp physicians at Auschwitz-Birkenau. There is some evidence that Mengele himself requested this assignment because of the opportunities it could provide for his research. Auschwitz-Birkenau was the largest of the Auschwitz camps and also served as a killing center for Jews deported from throughout Europe. In addition to other duties, Mengele also had responsibility for Birkenau's so-called Gypsy family camp. Beginning in 1943, Nearly 21,000 Romani men, women and children were sent to Auschwitz and imprisoned in the Gypsy camp. When this family camp was liquidated on the 2nd of August 1944, Mengele participated in selecting the 2,893 Romani prisoners who were to be murdered in the Birkenau gas chambers. Shortly thereafter, he was appointed chief physician for Auschwitz-Birkenau, and in November 1944, he was assigned to the Birkenau Hospital for the SS. As part of their camp duties, medical staff at Auschwitz performed so-called selections. The purpose of the selections was to identify persons who are unable to work. The SS considered such persons as useless eaters and therefore murdered them. When transports of Jews arrived at Birkenau, the camp medical personnel selected some of the able-bodied adults to perform forced labor in the concentration camp. Those not selected for labor, including children and older adults, were murdered in the gas chambers. All visibly pregnant women and mothers of babies and young children were sent to the gas chambers upon arrival. Mengele rationalized this as follows. When a Jewish child is born, or a woman comes to the camp with a child already, I don't know what to do with the child. I can't set the child free because there are no longer any Jews who live in freedom. I can't let the child stay in the camp because there are no facilities. That would enable the child to develop normally. It would not be humanitarian to send the child to ovens without permitting their mother to be there to witness the child's death. That is why I send the mother and the child to the gas ovens together. Josef Mengele was also alleged to have had an affair with the infamous Irma Greze, one of the most hated and feared guards in the camp. When Mengele discovered that she was having affairs with Jewish inmates, who were deemed racially inferior, he ended his relationship with her. Mengele was also a sexual deviant who indulged in sexual brutality. For example, while male prisoners were left standing at assembly awaiting his arrival, he is reported to have spent one whole night engaged in recording the reactions of their Jewish women to being raped by camp functionaries. Camp physicians at Auschwitz and at other concentration camps also conducted periodic selections in the camp infirmaries and barracks. They conducted these selections in order to identify prisoners who were either injured or who had become too ill or weak to work. The SS used various methods to murder these prisoners, including lethal injections and gassing. Mengele routinely carried out such selections at Birkenau, leading some prisoners to refer to him as the Angel of Death. Prisoner Gisela Perl, a Jewish gynecologist at Birkenau, later recalled how Mengele's appearance in the women's infirmary filled the prisoners with terror. We feared these visits more than anything else because we never knew whether we would be permitted to live. He was free to do whatever he pleased with us, and he did. When a typhus epidemic began in the women's camp, Mengele cleared one block of 600 Jewish women and sent them to their deaths in the gas chambers. The building was then cleaned and disinfected, and the occupants of the neighboring block were bathed, deloused, and given new clothing before being moved into the clean block. This process was repeated until all of the barracks were disinfected. Similar procedures were used for later epidemics of scarlet fever and other diseases, with infected prisoners being killed in the gas chambers. After World War II, Mengele became infamous for his work at Auschwitz thanks to the accounts of prisoner physicians who had worked under him and of prisoners who had survived his medical experiments. These experiments had been authorized by the SS, which was responsible for the management of the concentration camps. Mengele was one of some 50 physicians who served at Auschwitz. He was neither the highest-ranking doctor nor the commander of the other doctors who were present. However, his name is by far the best known of all the doctors who served at the site. One reason for this was Mengele's frequent presence on the ramp where selections took place. When Mengele did not himself perform the selection duty, he often still appeared at the ramp, looking among the prisoners for twins for his experiments and physicians for the Birkenau infirmary. Auschwitz not only provided prisoners for human experiments conducted at various other camps, but it also served as the site of a variety of human experiments. This is because of the number of the prisoners sent there. The SS sent 1.3 million men, women, and children from many different national and ethnic backgrounds to Auschwitz. Researchers looking for human subjects who met specific criteria could more easily find them at Auschwitz than at other camps. Mengele was one of more than a dozen SS medical personnel who conducted experiments on people imprisoned at Auschwitz. These doctors saw their appointment to Auschwitz as an exciting opportunity to advance their research. The experiments in the concentration camps permanently maimed many victims or caused them to die. In some experiments, death was the intended outcome for the victims. The medical professionals who conducted experiments at Auschwitz did not seek the prisoners' consent or inform them of their treatment or possible effects. The types of experiments conducted at Auschwitz included testing methods of mass sterilization, inflicting wounds on prisoners, or infecting them with diseases to study the effects and test treatments, conducting unnecessary surgeries and procedures on patients for research purposes, or to train medical professionals, and murdering and dissecting prisoners for anthropological and medical research. Mengele's mentor, Dr. Verschwer, may have arranged Mengele's assignment to Auschwitz for the purpose of supporting the research for the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Genetics, and Eugenics. Throughout his time at Auschwitz, Mengele sent his colleagues in Germany blood, body parts, organs, skeletons, and fetuses, all taken from Auschwitz prisoners. Mengele collaborated on his colleagues' research projects by conducting studies and experiments for them using prisoners. In addition to his work with the Institute, Mengele also conducted his own experiments on Auschwitz prisoners, hoping to publish the results and thereby gain the credentials to qualify for university professorship. In the course of his service at Auschwitz, Mengele organized a research complex located in a number of barracks. He chose his staff from among the prisoners who were medical professionals. Mengele was able to obtain up-to-date instruments and equipment for his research and even set up a pathology lab. Mengele's own research, and the research he conducted for the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, generally focused on how genes develop into specific physical and mental traits. When conducted ethically, this is a legitimate and important field of genetic research. However, the work of Mengele, Verschwer, and their colleagues was warped by their belief in the pseudoscientific theory of race that was fundamental to Nazi ideology. This theory held that human races are genetically distinct from each other. It established a hierarchy of races and stressed that inferior races are genetically more likely to exhibit negative traits than members of superior races. These negative hereditary traits supposedly included more than just physical and mental illnesses and deficiencies. They also supposedly included socially unacceptable or immoral behaviors, such as vagrancy, prostitution, and criminality. According to the false theory of race, intermarriage between races passed negative traits to superior races and undermined them. Mengele sought to identify specific physical and biochemical markers that could definitively identify the members of specific races. Mengele and his colleagues believed that finding such markers was vitally important for preserving the supposed racial superiority of the German people. For Mengele and his colleagues, the importance of the research justified conducting harmful and lethal experiments on people, in this case Auschwitz prisoners, whom they considered to be racially inferior. Mengele drew his victims mainly from two ethnic groups, Roma and Jews. These groups were of particular interest to biomedical researchers in Nazi Germany, as Nazi ideology considered both Roma and Jews to be subhuman and to pose a threat to the German race. For this reason, Nazi scientists did not consider medical ethics to apply to members of these groups. While Mengele served at Auschwitz-Birkenau, more than 20,000 Roma were imprisoned there, and hundreds of thousands of Jews arrived there on transports. Nowhere else in the world could scientists have access to so many members of these groups concentrated in one place. And nowhere else did they have the power to experiment on human beings in whatever way they wanted. Mengele commented to a colleague that it would be a crime not to take advantage of the opportunities for human experimentation at Auschwitz-Birkenau. In addition to choosing Roma as subjects for his medical experiments, Mengele conducted an anthropological study of the Roma men, women, and children in the Gypsy camp. When there was an outbreak of Noma, a gangrene of the mouth, among Roma children in the camp, he assigned prisoner physicians to study it. Noma is a bacterial infection that primarily afflicts extremely malnourished children. However, Mengele believed that the Roma children at Auschwitz suffered from Noma because of their heredity rather than because of the conditions of the camp. Several afflicted children were killed so that their preserved heads and organs could be sent to the SS Medical Academy in Graz and other facilities for study. In the end, the prisoner physicians discovered how to cure Noma, which was normally fatal. Nevertheless, all of the children who were cured were eventually murdered in the gas chambers. Mengele was particularly interested in identical twins, who in the 1930s were a major focus of human genetic research. Before World War II, Verschwer and other biomedical researchers used twins to study the hereditary basis of diseases. These earlier researchers obtained the consent of the twins or their parents, but it was difficult for researchers to enlist many twins for these studies. At Auschwitz, however, Mengele collected hundreds of pairs of twins from among the Jews who arrived there in transports and from among the Roma. No researcher had ever been able to study and experiment on such a large number of twins. Mengele ordered his staff to measure and record every aspect of the twins' bodies. He drew large amounts of blood from the twins and sometimes performed other painful procedures on them. Such was the case of Renata Gutmann. At Auschwitz, she became number 70917, was separated from her brother and mother and taken to a hospital where she was measured, x-rayed, and blood was taken from her neck. Once, she was strapped to a table and cut with a knife. Another Holocaust victim, Lorenz Menash, later recalled, "They also gave us injections all over our bodies. As a result of these injections, my sister fell ill. Her neck swelled up as a result of a severe infection. They sent her to the hospital and operated on her without anesthetic in primitive conditions. The experiments Mengele performed on twins included unnecessary amputation of limbs, intentionally infecting one twin with typhus or some other disease, and transfusing the blood of one twin to another." Witness Vera Alexander described how Mengele sewed two Romani twins together, back to back, in a crude attempt to create conjoined twins. Both children died of gangrene after several days of immense suffering. Many of the victims died while undergoing these procedures, and those who survived the experiments were sometimes killed, and their bodies dissected once Mengele had no further use for them. Miklos Nisli, a prisoner doctor at Auschwitz, recalled one occasion where Mengele personally killed 14 twins in one night by injecting their hearts with chloroform. If one twin died from disease, he would kill the other twin to allow comparative post-mortem reports. After he studied the autopsies, Mengele sent some of their organs to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin. When Mengele conducted selections of arriving Jews on the ramp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, he also looked for people with physical abnormalities. These people included dwarves, people with gigantism, or persons who had a club foot. His experiments on dwarves and people with physical abnormalities included taking physical measurements, drawing blood, extracting healthy teeth, and treatment with unnecessary drugs and x-rays. After Mengele studied these people, he had them murdered, then sent their bodies to Germany for study by researchers. Elisabeth Ovitz, a dwarf survivor of Mengele's experiments, later remembered, "It is impossible to put into words the intolerable pain that we suffered, which continued for many days after the experiment ceased." Mengele also sought out Roma and Jews with heterochromia, a condition in which a person's eyes differ from each other in color. One of Mengele's colleagues at Kaiser Wilhelm Institute was particularly interested in this condition. He killed people with heterochromatic eyes so that their eyes could be removed and sent to Berlin for study. However, Mengele still kept hundreds of human eyes pinned to his lab wall, like a collection of butterflies, as he called it. Most of the victims of Mengele's medical experiments were children. Mengele was friendly toward the children he selected for experiments, and they lived in separate barracks from the other prisoners and received somewhat better food and treatment. Moshe Offer, a survivor of Mengele's experiments, later recalled, "Mengele visited us as a good uncle, bringing us chocolate. Before applying the scalpel or syringe, he would say, 'Don't be afraid, nothing is going to happen to you.' Then he injected chemical substances and performed surgery on my brother Tibi's spine. After the experiments, he would bring us gifts. In the course of later experiments, he had pins inserted into our heads. The puncture scars are still visible. One day he took Tibi away. My brother was gone for several days. When he was brought back, his head was all dressed in bandages. He died in my arms." Mengele used children for his own experiments and also to support the work of the Wilhelm Kaiser Institute. He collaborated in a study of the change of eye color by putting a chemical substance supplied by one of his colleagues in the eyes of children and newborns. The results ranged from irritation and swelling to blindness and even death. The previously mentioned Hungarian doctor, Gisela Perl, described the aftermath of one brutal killing by Mengele. He took a piece of perfumed soap out of his bag, and whistling gaily with a smile of deep satisfaction on his face, he began to wash his hands. A prisoner who was assigned to care for Jewish twins, selected for Mengele's experiments, later described how the children reacted emotionally and physically to their treatment. Samples of blood were collected first from the fingers and then from the arteries, 2 or 3 times from the same victims in some cases. The children screamed and tried to cover themselves up to avoid being touched. The personnel resorted to force. Drops were also put into their eyes. Some pairs of children received drops in both eyes, and others in only one. The results of these practices were painful for the victims. They suffered from severe swelling of the eyelids, a burning sensation. The Holocaust survivor Alex Derkel reported witnessing Mengele performing a surgery without anesthesia, removing hearts and stomachs of victims. Yitzhak Ganon, a Jewish Auschwitz survivor from northern Greece, deported to Auschwitz at the age of 20, reported in 2009 how after Mengele removed his kidney without anesthesia, he was forced to return to work without painkillers. Mengele also sought out pregnant women, on whom he would perform experiments before sending many of them to the gas chambers. The Czech Holocaust survivor, Ruth Elias, was pregnant when she was transferred from the Theresienstadt ghetto to Auschwitz. She later recalled, "I delivered a beautiful big blonde girl, but Mengele ordered that my breast be bound, so that, as he said, we can see how long a newborn baby can survive without food." After watching her baby suffer for several days, a female Czech doctor gave Elias a syringe with an overdose of morphine to end the child's agony. Another Auschwitz survivor, Dr. Olga Lenyo, recalled how after Mengele supervised the birth of a child with meticulous care, within an hour he sent both mother and child to the gas chamber. On another occasion, Mengele ripped an infant from his mother's womb. Having expected twins to be born, he then hurled the child into an oven because it wasn't a twin as he had hoped. In January 1945, as the Soviet Red Army advanced through western Poland, Mengele fled Auschwitz with the rest of the camp's SS personnel. He spent the next few months surviving at the Gross-Rosen concentration camp and its subcamps. In the final days of the war, he donned a German army uniform and joined a military unit, which after the war ended, surrendered to the US military forces. Posing as a German army officer, Mengele became a US prisoner of war. However, the US Army released him in early August 1945, unaware that Mengele's name was already on a list of wanted war criminals. From late 1945 until spring 1949, Mengele worked under a false name as a farmhand near Rosenheim in Bavaria, and from there he was able to establish contact with his family. When US war crimes investigators learned of Mengele's crimes at Auschwitz, they tried to find and arrest him. However, based on lies told by Mengele's family, the investigators concluded that Mengele was dead. The US effort to arrest him forced Mengele to recognize that he was not safe in Germany, and with financial support from his rich family, Mengele immigrated to Argentina under yet another false name in July 1949. By 1956, he was well established in Argentina and felt so safe that he obtained Argentine citizenship as Jose Mengele. In 1959, however, he learned that West German prosecutors knew that he was in Argentina and were seeking his arrest. Mengele immigrated to Paraguay and obtained citizenship there. In May 1960, Israeli intelligence agents abducted Adolf Eichmann in Argentina and took him to Israel to be tried. Correctly guessing that the Israelis were also looking for him, Mengele fled Paraguay. With support from his family in Germany, he spent the rest of his life under an assumed name near Sao Paulo in Brazil. When his son Rolf visited him there in 1977, he found an unrepentant Nazi who claimed he had never personally harmed anyone and only carried out his duties as an officer. On the 7th of February 1979, Mengele, then 67 years old, suffered a stroke and drowned while swimming at a vacation resort near Bertioga in Brazil. He was buried in a suburb of Sao Paulo under the assumed name of Wolfgang Gerhardt. Mengele, the most notorious of the Nazi doctors, and one of the most infamous figures of the Holocaust, thus eluded arrest for 34 years and was never brought to justice. There were no tears shed for Josef Mengele. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.